In step 6 of this IPL course on self-awareness, we start to think about how people and their senses collecting data are not the same as computers being fed with input. And although computers are a useful comparator, we can learn a lot more about how the human body collects information and processes it.
So we're talking about characters now. And somebody said, well, we need a way of standardizing on the characters. We want to be able to hold character information on our cards. And they went to an organization called the American Standards Institute. I said, can you come up with a way of capturing character information on a computer? And they said, yeah, we can do that. And they invented a thing called ASCII. Now, ASCII stands for American Standard Character Information Interchange, I think, something like that. And they said, well, let's have 128, let's standardize, we'll have 128 different ways of holding information. And so each letter will be a given number in this whole thing. So they had uppercase characters, lowercase characters. They had standard numbers. Now those will be integers, of course. And they had a limited set of symbols for punctuation and so on. So within that 128, they have all this. That was good enough. Now, why am I doing this? Well, you might ask, why am I doing it? But I am doing it quite deliberately, believe it or not. So this relates to the human mind. Every time the government or science or whatever went to these clever people, whether it was Tom Watson or whoever it was, scientists that are developing physical equations and so on, those people came up with solutions which actually were they didn't realize it, but they were a reflection of how the human mind works, okay? Because when we do calculations in our mind, to some extent, we do integer calculations, and to another extent, we do floating point calculations. And nearly everything in our mind is this wobbly stuff, okay? Our minds aren't really digital minds at all. But you can take what is the reality of our minds, of the physical world, and you can, people say, well, say I've got over time, and that's an amount. The way computers work is they look at a wobbly wave and they say, well, what I'll do is every so often, as time goes on, I'll measure and I get myself a point on a graph. And that way, so every fraction of a second, I'll get that point, that point, that point, that point, that point. And they can all, it can become numbers which you put into a database. So you've got your numbers and they enable you. You've got your numbers, you can take one there, you've got a number, 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 and so on and so on and so on. So there's your numbers, and then you can use that to basically represent the sound. Now, depending on how often that time slice is, affects the accuracy of the way you've tracked the actual physical information. And if you don't trap it often enough, let's say you only trapped it at this point, this point, this point, you lose quite a lot of this information. So you lose the shape. So the shape could actually be doing something like that. But so the more often you catch it, the more accurately you capture the wave. When I'm talking to you, the software that's capturing my voice is actually looking at the sound wave, and it is capturing the wave 64,000 times per second. So for every second. Potentially, an ordinary telephony system will be catching the sound 64,000 times a second, which is very, very accurate in terms of tracking these sound waves. And that's why when it's reproduced at the other end, you get a pretty good sound wave. Now, if you don't track them that often, you lose the data. And typically nowadays, some systems only track 8,000 times per second. So therefore, you lose accuracy, but you only need less data to send the signal, and that's called compression. So it's a matter of how much detail do you need? Okay, so I'm going to relate that. I'm going to stop in a minute, but I want to kind of relate this back to how the mind works and how the body works. If you think about your own sight, so your eyes are capturing information, and they're putting it into a kind of database. We can talk about that later, your mental database. But your actual eyes are only capturing information at a certain number of times per second. So if you want to show a TV picture, you don't have to put up thousands of versions of the picture every second. There's a finite number of pictures that you can show to someone in a second, and they will perceive it to be a continuous flow, especially if it's TV and video and stuff like that. So ask yourself, how often do your eyes send the information that they're observing to your brain? Is it 10 times a second, 20 times, 50, 100, 1,000, 60,000 times a second? You can look it up if you like. But it does have implications, especially if you're buying a computer and you want it to have a good quality screen, and you want to be able to take movies at a certain number of frames per second. That'll give you a clue, because you might have an idea of frames per second that are captured. And in the time we're in now, computer screens and video cameras and so on are gradually capturing more and more information. But there's only a certain limit to the number of things that your human eyes will take in. So there's not much point, really, in terms of straight broadcasting, to actually capture more information than you need, because you've got to send it. So I'm going to end just here now. So we're talking about frames per second. How do your eyes work? And while you're thinking about that, you might also think, what about your ears? How often do your ears pick up information for a particular sound? And what about your other senses? How often do the senses in your body see if there's a needle or a hot poker or something nice? How frequently does your tongue send a taste signal to your brain? How much of that data is actually collected and going into your mind? So I'm going to leave it there, and we can press on later.
To help you become self-aware, you need to develop an understanding of how you, as a person, interact with the world around you. Your senses are the beginning of a thought process via which thought inputs take certain predefined paths through your mind. By the end of this self-awareness course, you'll be able to understand those paths and be able to control your thoughts rather than being a victim of them in some cases. You can make yourself into what is called a conscious competent. And with that competence, you'll be able to get jobs and be happy.
Okay, so let's press on with talking about computing. And I'm going to get rid of a lot of this. When I talk to people and when I give lectures, I quite like to not be over accurate or over pedantic, because I find it puts people off if you are always right with all your facts and your spellings and too precise and there's a word called didactic, which is too explicit. So a lot of what I do is open to interpretation. And what I'm hoping is you'll be watching these videos and you'll be thinking in your mind, he spelt that wrong, or I don't think that date is right, or the king wasn't called Ptolemy, or he didn't come from Athens, and Archimedes was, well, he was actually Archimedes of Syracuse, but you know, I'm guessing he probably did go to Alexandria and stuff like that. And what I'm hoping is if I've caught your interest at all, you're going to go off, not accept everything I say, but use the wonderful resources that are available to us now through Google and the internet and Wikipedia and stuff. And you can check anything I say out, and you're going to find quite a lot of errors. But you'll also find what I call seeds. I like to drop seeds into my conversation and hope that they grow in your mind. So the last time I was talking to you, I threw in a word, helicopter, I'm going to helicopter up. I did that for a reason. When I put numbers like 128, it may appear I'm just randomly picking a number, but I'm not. I have in mind potentially coming back to that number or catching your interest with that number. When I put up a number like that, it's close to the value of pi, sometimes written like that, sometimes written with a Greek symbol. But it isn't pi, it's close to it. And this is what I like to do. I don't like to do things exactly. I like to do things approximately, because that's the real world. The world we live in, the world of physics and waves and what I call wobbly world, is full of variables. We live in a variable world. There's all sorts of different things happening. Everything is shifting fast. And it is multi-dimensional. So as human beings, we aren't like computers at all. Clever people have made computers to copy a few of the things that humans do in our world. The processes that go on in our mind and the way our mind is organized is very different to computers, but we've extracted really, really simple aspects of our minds and we've made computers in the last 60 years, really. So
remember, we are using computing and the different types of data and different aspects of computer processors and so on to help you understand the human mind. We're going to reverse engineer out of this world of computing into thought paths, human reasoning, and the whole way in which you have programmed effectively your mind to run certain aspects of your behavior.